Hi there. Let's take a look at writing assignments on Packback. When you're on your Packback homepage, you can click Manage Assignments at the top of the page and head to Writing Assignments. Here, you'll have the opportunity to add a new assignment or edit any assignments that have already been created. When you're setting up a new summative writing assignment on Packback, you'll have the option of choosing a deep dive, which is a rubric specific summative writing assignment, and an originality review, which takes about 3 minutes to set up and is a good place to check for student integrity issues like plagiarism or AI generated writing. Check out the video on the originality review assignment type for more information on that one. We'll start by looking at a rubric specific assignment. Once you've chosen the deep dive, you can either select a prompt or a rubric that you've already created for another assignment, or create a new one. When setting up your new assignment, you'll first need to give it a title. Then you'll add a short description or subtitle that will take place below the title of the prompt. The long description box is where you'll place the prompt itself. You can just copy and paste the prompt from whatever you typically use to assign that writing assignment right into the long description. Once you've added your prompt, you can enter some guiding questions. These are excellent for making sure that students address specific facets of the content in their writing. These guiding questions can be anything you'd like. Think of them as content-specific questions that students need to address so you feel confident that they understand the content. While students are writing, they'll see those guiding questions right in their feedback, and it will even highlight for them inside their text where they're attempting to answer those questions. You will also be able to see highlights of where students are answering the guiding questions when you're grading their paper, which can really speed up content grading. Once you've typed in your guiding question, click Add and type more questions if applicable. Last thing to do when setting up a prompt is to add any resources you'd like students to use while they're working on their submission. This can be a book, academic journal, a website, or any other resource. That resource will live on the prompt page for students so they can engage with that resource as they write. If you'd like to save your prompt for the future, just make sure Save this version is checked. Now that you've added your prompt, the next thing to do is select a rubric or create a new rubric. If you'd like to use this rubric again, make sure to give it a title. These top components are the mechanics components of the rubric that Packback will assist with. These mechanics components will give students real-time feedback as they write, and teachers will receive grading assistance on the grading side of things. It's completely up to you which of these components you want to include. For example, let's say for my text analysis assignment here, I want to make sure my students write at least 500 words, and I will block their submission if they're outside of that range. So if they try to submit something that is 450 words, they'll just receive a pop-up telling them to write more before they can submit. If I'm not concerned about this component, I'll just choose not to include it on the rubric. The research quality component on the rubric allows you to set a minimum number of sources that students need to cite. And the formatting component allows you to determine what style those sources should be cited in. We'll guide students through how to cite their sources in that style as they write their submission. Let's say the assignment you're giving to students doesn't need to have a grammar and mechanics portion on the rubric. If I choose not to include grammar and mechanics, my students will still see that feedback while they're writing. As you're working on the rubric, only include the things that need to be measured for credit. Everything else can be unselected without impacting the feedback students receive while they're writing. Below those Packback assisted components of the rubric, you'll see the instructor graded rubric criteria. This is where your traditional rubric will go. Let's say one of my criterion is thesis development. I'll give it a title, and I can add up to 6 performance levels in that thesis development component. Name those performance levels anything I'd like, give them a description, usually copied and pasted from a typical rubric that I would already be using, and any point values associated with each level. If I would like to add performance levels, I can do that at the bottom here, as well as adding additional criteria that I need to make this rubric work for me. Once I'm happy with my rubric, I'll just make sure I'm saving it for the future so I don't need to create it again, and click Save and Use. After you've set up your rubric, you'll see the option to make this a benchmark assignment, which will turn off the real-time feedback for students, but still allow you the grading assistance when grading student writing. All you need to do is check that box, and student feedback will be hidden while they're writing on Packback. You also have the option of including a writing style here to help guide the feedback that students receive while they're writing to make sure it is appropriate to the type of writing they're doing. The originality fingerprint options allow you to toggle whether students can see their originality fingerprint before they submit to you. That will provide transparency and prevent a lot of unsavory behaviors from students. They'll be able to see if their writing will be flagged for plagiarism or AI-generated writing before sending their paper to you, and hopefully make better decisions. You also have the option to assign this assignment to multiple classes on Packback at once, and add your start date and due date. If you have students who need a different due date or some more time to work, you can check this box to enable due date extensions. All you'll need to do is type a student's name in and give them their own due date. That will ensure that they are not marked as late until their specific due date has passed. Once you're satisfied with your writing assignment, you can click Save Assignment, and it'll be ready for students to complete. Next, let's take a look at the student experience of completing the assignment we just set up. Once the start date has passed, or if there isn't a start date attached, it will show up on the home page of Packback for students and for you as the instructor. All they'll need to do is click that writing assignment, where they'll be able to see the prompt that we included, those guiding questions we want them to address as they write, any recommended resources we'd like them to use, and the rubric for that assignment. Once they're ready to begin, they can head up to the top and click Start My Deep Dive. As the students are writing, they'll receive real-time feedback on their writing on the right-hand side. These will be tied to those mechanics components of the rubric, and I can see specific suggestions by expanding here. Let's say I'm taking a look at this piece of feedback that my paragraphs are too short. It's reminding me how long a paragraph should be, and as a student, I can highlight which paragraphs are too short so I can make those adjustments quickly without reading very closely. Once I've adjusted that piece of feedback, it will go away to confirm that I've addressed it, and I can move on to my next piece of feedback. Students will also see those guiding questions they need to address, and clicking one of those questions will highlight in their work where they're already attempting to address that question. Students can use this information to make sure they're going in depth enough on addressing those questions before submitting to their teacher. Since we've enabled the originality fingerprint for students, as a student, I can check to see if I'm going to be flagged for plagiarism. Looks like my work is 100% unique, or if I'm going to be flagged for AI risk. If there is a rubric component to my assignment, I can leave research notes on the Research Notes tab Here, I can keep track of quotes and sources, anything I'm encountering during my research that I might want to include in my paper. If there's a source I want to include, all I need to do is right-click and mark that as a source. That will give me credibility feedback on the right-hand side for that source, some information on how to include parenthetical citations in my writing, and it will also automatically cite that source in whatever style the teacher chose when they set up the assignment. Next, let's take a look at the teacher experience of grading this student's submission. Once students have submitted, teachers can head to the Submissions tab within the Deep Dives assignment. Here, they'll be able to see the students when they submitted, or if they're in progress and haven't submitted yet, and they'll be able to see a uniqueness and AI risk score right here. Sometimes it can take about 30 to 60 seconds for the uniqueness and AI risk score to populate after we've scanned that student submission one more time. When I'm ready to grade, I will click the Grade button. Here, I'll be able to see student work on the left-hand side and my grading assistant on the right-hand side. At the top of the grading assistant, it gives me some high-level information. Did they meet the word count requirement and the minimum number of citations? When did they submit their work? That type of thing. Underneath, I'll be able to see the originality fingerprint. Here's where I can check for plagiarism or uniqueness. If any plagiarism is found, I can actually see a side-by-side comparison of the student's work and the work we found that matched on the web. Here we can see the student submission is at risk of AI-generated content. If I click Review, it will explain why it was flagged as a high risk, and I can even highlight the instances Packback found that seem to be generated by AI. These are color-coded. Red indicates a high risk, yellow indicates a medium risk, and green indicates a low risk. Scrolling down to those mechanics portions of the rubric, if I've enabled them on the rubric, Packback will recommend a score based on the rubric. These are just recommendations. I can change them if I need to, but I also can see the rationale behind why they were suggested in the first place. So if I take a look at this flow and structure category, it looks like Packback isn't recommending full points to this student. Clicking See Why will show me a breakdown of every component in that category, how they're weighted in our logic, and how the student performed. If a student receives a full point, that means they addressed all the feedback that came across their view before submitting to their teacher. If it's lower than a full point, there's some feedback that student didn't address before submitting. Here we can see sentences per paragraph is an area where they didn't quite address all the feedback. And just like the students, teachers can highlight those short paragraphs or areas of concern to leave a comment. This is very helpful because I know, as the teacher, my students saw that feedback before submitting. So I don't need to provide a lot of context to them. I can just leave a brief reminder and then move on. As I'm grading for mechanics, I'll keep my eye out for any area where the student didn't achieve that full point. Take a look at those areas of concern, leave any comments, and then if I'd like to adjust their score, I can do that. Once I've graded mechanics, I'll leave my content score for that student and any comments that I might have on their content, as well as overall feedback. While I'm grading content, it can be helpful to see if the students answered those guiding questions I asked them to. Taking a look at the AI Grading Assistant tools, I'll be able to see smart highlights for those guiding questions. Here, I'll see how many places the student addressed that question, and even highlight where they're speaking about that particular concept. This allows me to quickly see if they've addressed that question to my satisfaction, or if there's room for improvement. When I'm ready to finalize the grade, I have the option to allow this student to revise their work. I can give them a new due date for their revision. And once I submit and release that evaluation, the student will see that feedback and have the opportunity to revise and resubmit their work. This process can occur as many times as needed for the student work to meet your expectations. If I choose hide evaluation, the student will not see their grade. That allows me to submit all of my grades at once rather than individually. From the Submissions tab, I'll see that grade is not yet released. And once I've graded all my students, I can click the blue Post Grades button to release all of those grades and revision opportunities. If I'm ready to release my evaluation to the student right away, I'll click Release Evaluation and save. That shows me on the Submissions tab that the student is working on their first revision of their work. They haven't yet submitted it. And once they're submitted, I can then grade that revised work. Now you've seen the process of setting up a writing assignment on Packback for summative rubric-based assignments on deep dives. If you have any questions or need support, we always have a live chat option with humans available in the platform, and your dedicated curriculum consultant for one-on-one support. Thanks so much.